What does the Pact for the Future really represent? Is it a bold step toward global unity, or just another move to consolidate power in the hands of a few? These are the questions many are asking as geopolitical shifts grow more pronounced, and the Brics alliance stands at the center of the debate. As global institutions like the United Nations push for sweeping reforms, countries like Russia and China openly challenge the status quo, signaling that the world may be on the verge of a profound transformation. But whose future are we really talking about? In this exclusive interview with Professor Pacini, a distinguished expert in international relations and geopolitics, we delve deep into these pressing questions. Professor Pacini shares his candid thoughts on the increasing tension between globalist agendas and the rising influence of BRICS Plus. He sheds light on how BRICS nations are positioning themselves as key players in reshaping global governance, questioning whether the Pact for the Future truly serves the world's interests or if it's merely another tool for Western dominance. From the UN's controversial decision-making processes to the growing digital divide between East and West, Professor Pacini helps us understand how BRICS nations, through strategic moves, are working to secure their own digital sovereignty. The implications of this digital rift go far beyond the internet. It's about control, independence, and the future of global governance itself. The interview also touches on the delicate balance between economic development and environmental sustainability. How can nations like China, India, and Brazil reconcile their economic ambitions with the global pressure to reduce emissions? According to Pacini, the answer lies not in adopting the Western narrative, but in forging a new path that respects both growth and sustainability. Intrigued? We invite you to join us as we explore these vital issues with Professor Pacini, a prominent thought leader and voice in the world of geopolitics. His insights offer a fresh perspective on the future of BRICS Plus, global governance, and the shifting tides of international power. Don't miss this enlightening conversation that challenges conventional wisdom and offers a glimpse into the future of a multipolar world. Stay tuned as we dive into the complexities and nuances of this evolving global landscape.
Hi everyone, welcome to Brics Briefs. Today we're going to talk about the recent 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, which occurred from the 20th to the 28th of September 2024, so very recently. You can see the links below in the video description. During this summit, a particular forum called the Summit of the Future was held, which involved a discussion called the Pact for the Future. This session got a lot of airtime for quite a few very controversial reasons, which we'll get into, and because of the ongoing geopolitical contest between Western powers and emerging nations like those in BRICS. From digital governance and nuclear disarmament to financial reforms and Security Council restructuring, BRICS nations are working to ensure their voices are heard in global governance while navigating complex challenges like sustainable development and technological sovereignty. We have a returning guest on to help us analyze this event and its relevance to BRICS, Associate Professor Lorenzo Maria Pacini. Lorenzo is an Associate Professor in Political Philosophy and Geopolitics, specializing in multipolarity and in the fourth political theory of Alexander Dugin, and is involved in defense and intelligence consulting, writing occasionally for columns of different journals. All right, welcome, Lorenzo.
Thank you so much, Clive, and to all the friends of Think Brics channel.
Oh, excellent. No, thank you very much for your time. So we're going to go for an hour. So we'll see. We've got I've prepared a lot of questions. We want to go pretty deep. The topic itself of this UNGA, we're sort of introducing a few topics along this event. Not specifically this event, but obviously, as I said, there is some controversy. So we're hitting you up, Lorenzo, about this. So some critics have described the Summit of the Future as the final push by globalists to consolidate power, particularly through mechanisms like the Pact for the Future. Do you see this as the culmination of a long-standing globalist agenda, or is it simply an evolution of multilateral cooperation?
So thanks so much for this question. I think we should approach by considering several elements. because we enter in the context that we call info warfare. So let's start with a semantic element, which has to do with information warfare. Using similar terminologies is a common tactic of various institutional bodies, power groups, and factions, okay? Whether they are in alliance or in an open battle. And this creates a rapprochement of words that allows them to appropriate the communicational context and manipulate it in order to achieve a result, and which may be their own profit or defeat the adversary or his disqualification, or to create confusion or transform the entire meanings. The full world of mass medias, press, really know well these methods, okay? It's nothing new. There is a constant web of links being made and unmade between the words, the signifiers, and the content of the words, that is the meanings. That's something really basic in the sciences of communication, but we have to focus on that because to all of this is added the moral value, which especially is the sphere of politics and geopolitics, of course, and there becomes central. If we talk about the future, the word future itself, it's not negative or positive, it's neutral, okay? The future is a fact. And on that, I do not think there is any disagreement, okay? But what makes the difference between considering the name Pact for the future as something good or as something bad? By saying future, do we all think about the same thing? Do we all understand the same concept? Because that's the point of info warfare. So the United Nations, okay, Pact for the Future, in my personal opinion, is yet another globalist nonsense creature. I will be very honest today, okay, about United Nations. I will be very critical. Let me do it. Nothing that has come out of the United Nations till today has really led to something good. Especially in the last 30 years, the United Nations has been the center of promoting globalism. Okay, so the fact that Brics Plus, we should say, plays semantically on a similar register of the United Nations is to be interpreted very objectively. Okay, so let's keep for a moment the moral and personal approach. Brics countries are also members of the United Nations. United Nations now is 193 members, if I remember well. So in politics, and even more in international politics, making sudden moves is risky and particularly ill-advised because it causes a large-scale effects that are not easy to manage. A president, a leader of a state, is not someone that can get up in the morning and do what he wants, you know. There are some balances. If you take a decision like going out from United Nations, quitting with them, this means to revise international agreements, the market, changing world defense strategies, blah, 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 lots of stuff. In people's minds, everything is easier, you know. People think that really being a president means that you can do what you want, but that's not like that it works. So I really found that significant that the United Nations Ordinary Assembly in New York, okay, took this decision, and 3 of the major Brics countries are China, Russia, and Iran, and they have rejected the Pact of the Future. Actually, China was neutral, to be correct, okay? And this should give us something to think about, because reform of a body like the United Nations is a global urgency. And the United Nations came into being as a tool of the expansion of Anglo-American hegemony since the beginning of their life. And its effect has always been proportionate to the maintenance of that hegemony on the global scale, okay? So as a kind of deterrence disappears, so that's the very scaffolding of the United Nations. It's time maybe to think to something alternative, an alternative organization. Let me say, Brics Plus are thinking about, I had many advices, many rumors about that, okay? Also write a couple of articles concerning this topic about a possible alliance. Let me use this term. It's not correct, actually. We still don't know which form we'll have, but an alliance with SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. As we know, BRICS is a geo-economical partnership. SCO actually is an anti-terroristic organization. So we have economics and strategics. If they will start this process and they will create this link and maybe do this kind of partnership, they effectively become something like a counter NATO, alternative to NATO, that will have, I'm pretty sure of that, a similar power in politics as the United Nations. And this is something very important, because what are today the United Nations, which is very, very use, concrete use. We saw in the last, the last years, the last 2 years, United Nations didn't do nothing of meaningful for the international context. All the focus, all the realpolitik, we should say, quoting the German authors, the realpolitik leaders did by using the partenariats, through the partenariats. And so this is opening maybe a new era of the international relations, where those kind of organizations that we have created in the last century that are not actually working anymore, not well, not for very initial purposes, must be switched in something else, or must be quitted, definitely creating something else. Today, what BRICS will do in Kazan in next general plenary forum is more important than the General Assembly of the United Nations. That's it.
Wow, that's a big statement. Yeah. No, I'm glad you laid that out for us, actually, Lorenzo. Your general view of the United Nations. So, and my next question is really on this sort of getting into that, because this, the Pact for the Future, right, was adopted without a formal vote, but through consensus. How does this method of decision making at the UN impact global governance? And what concerns do countries like Russia have in this process?
Here too, we have to, disclose some truth about how works an international organization. The very fact that the methods of political participation in the United Nations are being changed, in my opinion, is indicative of the terminal status of the organization, okay? We are really at the last breaths. I would like to point out a detail, temporarily recent, but certainly not the only one in the history, which is that of the attack ordered by Bibi Netanyahu against Lebanon, killing Hassan Nasrallah. Okay, it's a very delicate topic. The order, but just focus really on what happened, the fact. The order was issued directly from the United Nations headquarters. So also photos about the event has been spread the World Wide Web. This event translates into a few words. You can do anything at the United Nations, even ordering killing someone, even breaking the United Nations Charter itself, as long as you are in the right position of power. So, from a multipolar perspective, an organization like this looks worse than ridiculous. Because appealing to the United Nations, hoping to get something right, is unfortunately still a very common bias of Western countries, where people find it very difficult to recognize how things are, honestly, and try to hide the corruption, infamy, and all the problems. Can you imagine? We accept events like that, but it was also events in the past, okay? We don't want to quote something recent. Okay, let's think about, I don't know, Congo at the end of the 60s, okay, where United Nations were supporting the colonialist Belgium and France, for example, okay, with the militaries of the military missions of the United Nations. controversial moments that nowadays we can judge with a different mood, but in that period, that moment, were very scandalous. So something changed? Actually not. And in many Western countries, Western people have this approach to United Nations, as you know, yeah, there will be always kind of governance that is higher than you. And so if you you're bullying a little bit, we will go to United Nations and we will solve the problem. But actually, it's not like that. So since it's time to dismantle some political theater, if we really want to comment on the decision-making mode, then it's appropriate to say that it's not the first time of an anomalous mode adopted for voting. Please, as a political philosopher, let me say, voting is not the only way to decide something, okay? Of course. So I think it's a policy. Everybody recognize that we don't vote for everything. But I don't want to be, to discount anything. Just we think of these beliefs as something eternal, but actually it's a mode that has been adopted for just over a century, okay? When we started to have democratical processes, we switched from monarchies to republics, etc. Second, to speak of consensus, it's a specific word in politics and in also in law, international law. This is the presence of a covenant that is in effect an international treaty and is not legally incorrect. The covenant must be signed, and if a country doesn't sign it, I do not see why it should be affected by that covenant. The member countries of the United Nations retain a certain autonomy in spite of everything, okay? So the United Nations is not, at least as it never become, a global parliament of a single government. Even if we try to consider it as, I repeat, this kind of, highest level kind of political power. That's not. The United Nations, if you follow their meetings, it's not a parliament. They propose and they discuss from the commissions some problems, some topics. 99% of them are about wars, military operations, this kind of problems, okay? But this kind of consensus is totally normal by my point of view. Who adopted the Pact for the Future? Of course, wants, his own interest. It's business is business. We didn't vote for Pact of the Future. Why should receive the effect of the Pact? This would not be freedom, actually. And so we should questioning more about what are becoming United Nations. Because if we mandatory have to accept what we decide, maybe we have really a problem of democracy, question mark.
Yeah. As an example, where you were saying, voting is not the only way to make a decision. Like say on a board, there would be, better example, maybe in China. So an actual political system where at one party, there's people, they all talk, and then one person considers all those inputs and then makes a decision. And as you said, like a monarchy, right? Obviously, usually a monarch would listen to advisors, or he wouldn't. He would just decide, which has never been ideal, because then the people resent that person because he's not perfect. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. But yeah, I'll get on the next one, because it's sort of bringing up Russia, because I think the Ministry of Foreign Affairs made some pretty blunt statements about this pact for the future. So the UN's future pact, but whose future exactly? Why does Russia firmly oppose it?
That's a very important step in understanding what will be the future of this organization. In my personal opinion, Russia opposes it because the time has come. The Pact for the Future was born and yet another Western treaty to impose a certain vision of the world, of values, of life, okay, of the future precisely, which is perhaps not the same as that of the other countries. Russia, and not only Russia, voted against it, and now it can do so. What's the time? A multipolar transit was initiated by those two major players, Russia and China. Okay, whose cooperation has led in a few years, and particularly in the last 30 months, since the beginning of the special military operation. And they brought to a decisive transformation of all the international chessboard. I really personally think that in the last century, in the 20th century, there is a name that will be remembered forever. Anyway, for international politics, that has been Henry Kissinger. He determined the future of many countries. Maybe in this century, we will remember, for example, the name of Sergei Lavrov. We actually, in 2 years, transformed completely the international asset. So, like Russia, many other states have no intention of submitting to the globalist agenda. Is this a crime? Russia has its own plans for its future. It's very famous, this project that in Russia you can find everywhere. They produced also a couple of books. It's called Russia 2062. You would say, why 62? Okay, because it's a plan stated in a couple of years ago, so 2022, for a 40 years development of Russia. Nobody knows this in the West. In China, they did something similar. They programmed already 50 years for the future. This is very typical in China. Okay, they have a very long-term perspective in political programming, economical programming. This is very Confucian. Okay, it's the Asian wisdom, I used to say. They can project and provide lots of things, and they calculate all the options. They're genius in that. And it's very different because they need to approach to the life with different style. Okay, so one wonders why each country does not have its own plans. This plurality, this richness of point of views, it's something that, in my opinion, should be normal and should become the basis of an international true cooperation, not imposition of one ideology, like the usual Western power. That has been a kind of in international relations, in politics, a kind of soft power colonization. Small but significant acts of disobedience, we should say, to the Western control are small possible steps toward change. Think to Africa. Okay, we are watching this a rise of African countries. Okay, one interesting point of African countries is that most of them are fighting now to emancipate by Western European colonialism. Okay, they are choosing different partners like Russia, like China, but also like North Korea, but also like Indonesia, Malaysia, okay? And they want to have nothing to do, no business with that kind of ideologies that they had imposed for such a long time, that is centuries actually, okay? Do they have the right to do that? That's a question that, it seems like stupid maybe, but it's not, because if we give a look to what is concretely happening, not the political rhetoric, not the words of the leaders, blah, 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 mass media, no, what actually is happening. Because, for example, this kind of reject from Russia to the Pact for the Future, reading some Russian authors, considering where they want to go, considering also how much they have invested in partenariats like Brics, but also like Eurasian Economic Associations, and more, they declared already their will to take another way and give a different future to the world. And they found their partners to do that. They found other countries that they were thinking the same thing, and they said, why not? Let's try to do together. And this is something that together was excluding the West. And I understand it's not simple for the Western hegemony to, to realize that they're losing their power, because it's not political power. Power is not something that stays only in the world of ideas. Power means money. Power means, influence. Power means control. And that's something that is a fact. And losing that means that maybe you will not realize your project of governing the whole world, of having your final empire with the clash of civilization and the hand of the history, for example.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, let's move on to some more specifics. So, Russia's position on digital governance. So they were quite clear, but they were very clear, actually, as you were describing, why they're clear. And I think that's very valuable for the audience to really think about too, countries like China and Russia, how they plan. That's very important because there's a very big difference. European countries, Australia, USA, we don't plan like that. Yeah. We don't really plan. I know the governments, the bureaucracy of our Western governments, but then the plans change as a new government comes in sometimes. So it's quite difficult to have long-term planning. But on digital governance, Russia and several other countries voiced objections regarding the Global Digital Compact, accusing the West of monopolizing internet regulation. How do you see the future of digital governance evolving, especially with the geopolitical divide between BRICS and Western nations?
It's a very important topic. Let me say, in these, all those countries that are under the control of the United States or United Kingdom are missing really the point. If I think to Europe, for example, no one has a real proper control on the digital devices, platforms, networks, also in strategic. And that's a big problem. Let me say with Karl Marx, maybe it's really a problem of who owns the means of production, okay? Because to be honest, I think that the problem of internet monopoly is much more serious than people think. And Russia and China, for example, they have incredible development of digital life with important use of artificial intelligence, okay? The internet began, remember, as an American military platform, and that has remained. We use the internet daily without thinking about it. We are using also now, but when it was first launched in 1969, this was not done for civilian use. So in a digitalized world where technology is an increasingly symbiotic element with human life, imagine we have our smartphones. They are prostheses of our bodies. We cannot live without them. And so you cannot leave the internet to chance. A military asset means a military use. The internet is a weapon. So having digital sovereignty, terrible new word, sovereignty, we risk the censorship from this. Governing one's own platform is a necessity today. This is nothing strange that countries like Russia, China, also Iran have developed very independent networks and are slowly migrating to them. We have RUNET, we have Iranet, I don't remember the Chinese one, and they are step by step, moving. It's not so easy to move all the entire lives. Can you imagine? The entire financial world is based on internet. All the banks, all the transactions, the transports, is something very important. So this, in my opinion, will play a decisive role in the near future. I think at least in the next 2.5 years until 2027, where digital development will be very strong. Okay, so it's very important to focus on that. Whether we like it or not, artificial intelligences are integrated into the daily lives of citizens in almost every state. And they have been used already since a very long time in military staffs. Okay, so it's an assertion based on the recognition of concrete events around us. So now, think for a moment what it might mean to have digital systems that are in the hands and the control of another country, perhaps an adversary, or worse yet, an enemy country. You can see how this cannot work. Okay, so again, the geopolitical distancing with the West by the Brics will force a review of the administration, so-called administration of the internet. Who controls the room with the red button to press? Who is the one who has the key to switch off the world? So let's try to think about a scenario in which the members of the partnership activate a new shared network, an alternative to internet, and start them navigating and migrating all systems and devices. The result, which is the West remains excluded from the games, even in virtuality. Double checkmate. We will see what.
That's very profound. Like, because I remember, I'm old enough to remember when the internet was not connected to everything. And then over the years, everything is on the internet. Banking, payroll, government services, everything. There isn't anything that is not connected to the internet now.
We called it, sorry to interrupt you, the Internet of Things. Internet of Things, that really we are digitalizing every aspect of our life. So yeah, everything is connected.
Yeah. So it is, yeah. Well, look, on security, so on the topic of Security Council reforms and geopolitical balance, one of the key deliverables, sort of, this is the language, right, of the Pact, is the reform of the UN Security Council. So how do you think these reforms will affect the geopolitical influence of BRICS nations, particularly regarding the underrepresentation of Africa?
I will spend a few words about Africa. It's a topic that I really love. Africa, in my opinion, will always be underrepresented in today's West. I'm sorry to say this, but it's a fact. I don't see a real interest by the majority of the Western countries to rehabilitate Africa. Okay, the West first colonized and enslaved, then integrated with a double standard to the point of the absurdity of forcing integration, causing the effect of disintegration and problems, many problems, as we see with the immigration, for example, as we see with this kind of, very, very weird, because very weird, the Netflix adaptation, of the history. If this is a schizophrenic behavior, cancel culture, wokeism, for example, are some fashionable expressions of it. Africa is going through a period of strong social transmutation, which will bring it to a great dawn. I'm sure of that. But this is a process that needs time. It needs really time. So regarding to the proposed reforms of the United Nations Security Council, one really needs to do something, to some geopolitical thinking about that. The Council, remember, was established under particular historical delicate circumstances, the end of World War II, to balance that situation, international situation that had arisen. Okay, so where we had actually two main poles, the West and the East, America and Soviet Union, that were fighting, blah, blah, blah. Everybody, we know that story. So today the world has changed. And there is no denying that, okay? There are other needs. Let's assume for a moment the positivity of reforming the United Nations Security Council. As I said already, I am of the opinion of abandoning the United Nations and building an alternative body, okay? But some groups have, for example, the European groups at the United Nations have proposed reforming the Security Council by allocating seats not to individual states, but to regional groups. So in this way, the Council would become a kind of parliament, almost absorbing the General Assembly according to democratic criteria. We always use the so-called democratic criteria, just to be fair for the future, and electing representativeness, as is the case with parliamentary groups and parties. Do I have to be honest? This proposal seems to me almost as if we want to ask to the musician of the Titanic, okay, that is sinking, to play another piece of music. What is the point of reforming the United Nations? French people should say à l'occidental, in the Western way. Who bothers with the Security Council? This is an exquisitely geopolitical question, not philosophical, not legal, not moralistic. What is the purpose? Why reforming Security Council? I don't say that Security Council is good at all, okay? There are problems, but that point was established because of the deterrence that was called nuclear weapons. And that problem was started by United States of America. So clearly, to give more power to the United Nations. For what reason we should change the Security Council? And who is promoting that? Please look to that, okay? Because multipolar partnerships scare the West. That's the truth of the matter. And any attempt to explore avenues others than those already known and mapped out by the hegemon is seen as a mistake or something terrifying, something problematic, something that will escape by the control. We said already before, many things are already out of the control of the United Nations, for example. We saw in the last day, United Nations was not able to stop the beginning of a war. Can you imagine? The absurd is that some members of the United Nations, some employees of the United Nations died during that attack. I don't see an international scandal. No, nobody's talking about that. Why? What's happening? Where is this power of control, of governance of the United Nations? I'm still, if someone has the answer, please send me an email, because I would really love to see that. What I see is that this Titanic is sinking really well and really fast.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. The confidence, what I would describe as confidence in that institution, is just evaporated. I mean, the last few months, particularly. And I think as also the citizens, just my opinion, but the citizens have become more engaged.
Yeah.
And they're paying a lot more attention to it. Everyone's sort of seeing it. So they're going, well, that's really making the confidence leave as well. So this is interesting. We should actually, Lorenzo, we should actually explore that, as a professional like that you are, an expert, I would say. These are the sorts of discussions we should have. If we can't have them in professional institutions who will actually listen, I mean, we have opportunities now with Brics. Kazan coming up. Russia is going to chair Brics over the next few years too. They want to have dialogue, but we should do that, as part of the general attempt to help. Anyway, I do apologize. Sometimes I'm babbling on, but anyway, it's very interesting, because we're bringing up quite important.
Can I say one thing, Clive?
Yeah.
Just to subline what you said. Let's give a look to what is happening around us. Okay, in the last weeks that are missing to arrive to the beginning of the summit, I see a kind of tentative to block the beginning or the consequences of that summit. One example, very short, you quoted a few seconds ago, this awareness of people that is increasing. I will give now an information that is just to reflect. We know that there are something like 34, 35 applications by different countries for joining the Brics partnership. 28 of them are Muslim, with a majority of Muslim countries.
Oh.
Actually, as we know, until a few weeks ago, Iran is since decades, since the Islamic Revolution, leader in the world about battle against Zionism, for example, and the state of Israel, okay? And it's a delicate situation because you already have almost 1 year a new conflict, a new war that is going on in the Middle East and that is changing many positions of countries in the world. Imagine that in Brics, join all those countries. Brics becomes, in 5 seconds, a kind of Islamic partnership, effectively. Okay, what does it mean? Yes, it's a geoeconomical partnership, very well. This means that Islamic countries can really do an important alliance under, why not, the leadership of the main one that already had this charge, and they can make many problems to the Western interests. For example, to the American interests that are declared interest for the Zionist entity, okay? So what happened that someone literally had detonated another conflict, another war, and many problems, and killed the leaders in the last weeks. And this had the consequence of attracting the intervention of other countries that are members of Brics that had different position, like Russia. For example, Russia has important trade with Israel. Like China never entering in the ideological questions, religious questions, okay, religious problems in the world. They only in their peacekeeping policy is to enter in the problem only when it's strictly political and geopolitical. Has happened for the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, okay, but they didn't do that for Gaza, for example. So that's interesting. Maybe someone is trying to, block this application, block this possible evolution of the partnership. And we have to consider this because this has something to do with global governance of United Nations, of Brics. We have a multi-level problem now that is mixing, okay? And what is going to happen if all those countries will enter in Brics? What is going to happen if they will not join because Brics Summit will be a disaster, for example, because there are many interests. And if you want to, create a big problem to your enemy, attacking frontally, yes, it works, but it's only a question of damage. Isolating it, that's a good way to have a long-term effect on the damage that you want to procure.
Yeah, and this is sort of what I was going to bring up next with the global governance. You're sort of touching on this, which is good. And you've sort of touched on this as we've gone along. And I think, well, I will put it to you. We've got about 18 minutes. We try to keep it in under an hour, Lorenzo. But if we need to go over, because this is quite important, I think, and having you speak on this in a very honest way, a very blunt way, I think a little bit too, is really good. So, but the concept of global governance, it sparked concern about the increasing centralization of power institutions like the UN. And given the discussions around the Summit of the Future, could this be a sign that the era of globalism is shifting? Or do you think it's an effort to entrench the globalist structures even further?
That's a very complex question. I will try to resume an answer. I apologize in advance if I will not be exhaustive, okay? Personally, I don't think it's enough to establish partnerships, abandon the United Nations, or tear up some agreements in order to defeat globalism. Globalism is an ideology. Ideas, such a way, governs the world. Changing the ideas of the people is something more complicated, and it requires more time. So nowadays, in political sciences and political philosophy, we differentiate three main categories of globalism, okay? The first one is the pluralist globalism that recognizes the existence of multiple peoples and human families, but aims so that these, while respecting their essence, can cooperate and know each other, converging toward the same destiny. Okay, so different forms have existed of globalism along the history. Okay, since ancient times, the dialogue, for example, among the ancient Egyptians, ancient Greeks, ancient Romans, was a form of pluralist globalism. Likewise, the interaction between the Mandan people and the original peoples of America, the so-called Amerindians. Okay, the empires of classical history regarded themselves as universal. Ancient Black Empire of Egypt, ancient Imperial Rome, for example. But in this universality, they recognize difference. This is a constant Europe, which is distinguished from imperialism, supreme phase of the capitalism, to use a Marxist language, destructive, imposing, and plunderer. Then we have a kind of globalist globalism. Okay, it's based on the pure globalism. Okay, precisely what is we sometimes we say we call it also mondialism. Okay, mondialism from Le Monde in French, that is the word. Okay, the globe, but approached by human habitated globe. Okay. It is the American-centric view of the life, okay, the paroxysm of globalization. Mondialism has changed from capitalism after the defeat of communism and the Western liberal victory, imposing itself and forcefully attacking different collectivities and peoples in the name of the neoliberal democracy. So, from this kind of mondialism, okay, it is a neoliberal globalism. The goal is the creation of a new world order headed by an oligarchy that calls itself as, a kind of philanthropic organization. But this globalism is based on a kind of monopolarism. That is the idea that there must exist a single pole, that is the Western one, guarantor of the world equilibrium, as preconized, for example, from Francis Fukuyama, okay, through the concept of the end of the history. This concept of monopolarism combats multipolarism, okay, which would enshrine the idea of a world based on civilization and imperial states. Not to be confused with multilateralism, which no longer recognize centers of decision makings and do not see the world in blocks of civilization, but rejects this idea, affirming the existence of a nation state with freedom to be actors on the geopolitical stage. As long as one remains in the neoliberal and American-centric paradigm traced by the monopolar order. Multilateralism is thus supremacy Americanism, a la Kissinger, okay, disguised as multipolarism. Then there is another school of multipolarism, that is the Eastern one, promoted mostly by China, which is pretty different. It's based on a different concept, both in assumption and proposals, whereby which promotes a community of common future destiny for humankind as the central pole, and we might say as an idea that is embodied and polarized, and around it revolve the states, which go to constitute the interaction as nodes. That's why sometimes we say multinodal model. And finally, we have a national imperialist globalism. Very quickly, it recognizes the existence of multiple human families and civilizations, but argues that one civilization should prevail over another. Okay, and this form recognizes ethno-pluralism, hierarchizing who should dominate or should be dominated behind an imperialist vision. So multipolarism recognizes some decisions points based on an independent rationality with roots in a special civilization. This is more or less what Samuel Huntington's version, okay, when he was speaking about the clash of civilizations. The clash of civilization maybe is misunderstood. It's not an invitation to clash. Huntington, as far as I know, tried to emphasize differences at the basic level, not differences in areas of interest. So the clash of civilizations is possible in the realist tradition when there is a sovereignty, when there is freedom, and when there is chaos in international relations. All of these concepts come from the realist theory of international relations. Okay, the only difference between classical realism and the civilism consists precisely in the fact that it does not deal with the nation state, but with civilizations. Civilizations are represented here as new forms of political unity. It's therefore integration necessary. Eurasian integration in our sense, Islamic integration in the case of Muslim society, integration of peoples in Europe, African integration, and so on. We are dealing with the large spaces, which are called civilizations. The freedom of the subject of sovereignty is no longer the nation state as it was in the 19th century, but in civilization. The model of a national state during the 20th century is collapsed, and that's a fact. And today we see the effect of that collapsing. Okay, so as far as the clashes, there is the possibility of war, but this is a basic principle of realism in international relations. When we have problems between countries, sorry to say, we do the worst. It's full history. History is full of that. Okay, so the new aspect of this multipolarity is that there are far fewer poles. That is, the poles are not numerous as the number of nation states that we have now. We can have poles that are groups of nations over poles that are inside of a singular nation. Imagine Russia, for example. Russia has lots of ethnies, lots of religions. If I consider, for example, a pole as the Islamic pole, this means that Russian Islamic people can join that pole, but they also are part of Russia as a state. Okay, so the nation state recognized by international law are many, but only a few of them could aspire to a true sovereignty in the current situation, to become independent and to become a pole. That's why when we say multipolarism, we don't have to think that we have around 200 countries in the world and so we will have 200 poles. Okay, that's a fact. It's necessary to unite them into a kind of supranational unity based on the common denominator of civilization. In a general sense, multipolarity emerges as a kind of semantic plurality. Different civilizations have their own conception of life, of future, of good, of bad, of the universe, of God, of man, of gender, blah, blah, blah. Okay? They have different history. They arrived at this point of the history by different ways. So to establish a multipolar world order, we must listen to everyone, all representatives of all civilizations, but not just one country. Even within each civilization, there should be a dialogue between peoples and internal tradition, however. So this is a kind of synthesis of the multiplicity and diversity of the multipolar cultural world. And it's difficult to establish. It's much more easier to impose a project, the value system, or one another advanced civilization that try, to govern the so defined lower civilization. It's not globalization in the proper sense. Okay, it's the projection of one part of humanity onto the whole of humanity. So the West asserts itself as a kind of destiny and project for everybody. West decided in a moment that all civilizations should become as West. Americans invented this concept, export of democracy. It's made by bombing people, made by bombing countries,
It's what
made
we've
by
seen.
sanctions, made by imposing dollar. Multipolarism fights against this and defends the right of over civilization to have their own understanding of the essential of everything. Okay, regarding terrorism, war, sanctify, history, blah, blah, blah. It's clear that globalism is over. It's the end of the liberalism has come. Okay, that's we see this collapsing. At the same time, it's extremely important to understand that we have to start a new phase of global governance, as we said at the beginning of our talk, with a different meaning of governance and global. That is no more the globalist one, the mondialist one, but could be global in the sense of the globe that is made of different poles. So creating multipolarism. And this process, the structuring of blocks, and that's amazing to have Brics, they call Brics, no? Of blocks of
Yeah.
civilization and dialogue between them, it's the main task today, in my opinion. And this will be so important. A new governance passes through educating leadership, future leadership with this awareness. What we want to create is what I like to call really a pax multipolaris, okay? The peace in multipolarity. That's a very important point. We cannot discount that, because if we miss that point, we will do the same thing that we had before, just under a different name with different people. But we will not bring anybody anywhere.
That's. I hope people. There's a good thing about YouTube. You can go back and listen to it again, because I think you'd have to. If you're listening to this, I think you need to go back and listen to Lorenzo again. That's my opinion. So, but I would be amiss with, like, we're about 5 minutes off an hour, but I would be amiss if I didn't bring up this next topic, right? And I'm not sure of your position. I'm not gonna on this topic, but I have my own position. I've done my own research, but I'm going to put it to you, Lorenzo. So, on climate change and sustainable development. So, the Pact emphasizes climate change and sustainable development goals. How do Brics nations reconcile their economic development needs with the global pressure to reduce carbon emissions and transition to renewable energy?
Very briefly on this topic, geopolitics of the environment is a very fascinating topic, and much to our sharing, a very embarrassing one, likely, also in the academic world. There has been very important authors, I think, to Chosudowski, for example, that has spoken a lot about geopolitics of climate change, okay, so-called climate change. As we all know by now, there are various schools of thought regarding the climate change. So it's an issue that is as early as the 20th century was turning in a leitmotif to a certain scientific, indeed scientist narrative. So beyond which school of thought one decides to follow, it's clear that addressing the climate issue is a geopolitical and political urgency, because it's one of the driving issues internationally. So we cannot skip that. You cannot have a nation that ignore that. Nobody will trust, that nation. So the Brics countries are not exempt from this involvement, and that's a great chance on how to reconcile economic development with the needs of emission and renewable energy. For example, I think there is a problem of logic to be resolved. Economic development is not equivalent to pollution. There is development and development, different kinds. It's a matter of deciding what kind of development you want to achieve, for example. It's also about defining what pollution is. Carbon is pollution, maybe yes, maybe not. These definitions are very political and not only scientific. Science, as even the most foolish have realized by now, is very political. We saw in the last years. Adapting production processes, developing new sources of energies, building plants and vehicles, and it's in itself, it is an investment that grows economically. We often have a concept of development that is equals to gain, but the two terms are not synonymous. In my personal opinion, um, I want to let you understand this. It's a fun fact, okay?
Okay.
Russia has been criticized a lot by some people because I think it was last year, signed one important international document about climate change, where there was inside the reduction of carbon, all these things everybody we know to switch in a green mood, electronic hybrid cars, blah blah blah, and that was a scandal. I remember some of my students, some of my colleagues. Oh, you see, your Russia is not different than United States, is not different than Italy, is not different than European countries. And I was like, you know what? It's very interesting. Yeah, they signed it. President signed that. Let me go to see what they signed. You know what? The document was really funny. All the countries were applying, signing that document to have this change in a couple of years. Production must be directed in only in hybrid cars. These things we know. We have daily them on our breaking news.
Yeah.
Russia signed that contract, and there was a little piece that said that Russia will start to move the infrastructures, the productions, all the ecological stuff starting from 2016. 2060.
Really?
That means in 36 years. Okay, so please again consider that international relations, politics, it's not something that we do only approaching by a very strong moral, basic stand. We have to do step by step. So when Russia said something like that, Russia is investing a lot in some ecological green things, okay, in Russia, but doesn't go to the world and impose that. Okay,
Yeah.
living in Russia, you can get there immediately. That document shows exactly what I said. Yeah, for an international convenience, let's say that we will join, but we have that line more that changes everything. That means, yeah, we show you that we do what you want, we are by your side, of course, but in the meantime we do our job, we do our business, and then let's see from now to the 2060 who will have reason, if you will still be ready, and capable to impose us your green policy. I don't think so.
That's a really good point. It's a good example too, actually. And I definitely take your point, and I'm sure the audience does, on pollution, because, and I don't mean to inject my opinion too much, because I'm trying to be very neutral, right? Being a journalist, I'm not a journalist, so I don't have that restriction, right? But I do try to be neutral. But pollution is an issue, absolutely. But I will give the example. Sorry, I just want to give the example because very recently, nuclear power for many decades in Australia, it's banned, right?
Yeah.
But in the last few weeks and the last few months, Microsoft has said we're going to build nuclear power plants, not because the people need them, because the cost of electricity is too high. It's a problem with pollution, because they want to run their data centers. It's purely a corporate issue. It's purely a shareholder, right? And they're going to do it, and the government's going to sign off on it, and they have, and it's done. There's no debate. There's no talking about it. It's just as an example to show the audience, from what you've said, and that example where it's done just like that. There's no anything. There's no politics. There's so. But you were going to say, right?
The personal interest of big corporations Many times, for which my experience and my studies are something different than the interest of the common good of people. So yeah, we should really discuss about that, because it's easy to affiliate someone to the word green as a semantic problem, but being truly green is something else. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a common battle, and we really have to think about that when someone suggests us to change something so meaningful in our lives. Always, just to preserve the doubt that is the beginning of knowledge, let's ask ourselves why. Who is asking us, and why? This for everything, for everything.
Yeah, that's a good tip. There you go. So, okay. So the next subject, and we've gone over, but I think it's important enough. We have someone like you about political philosophy and geopolitics, which is the main subject that we sort of get into with Think Brics. So let's go on a bit further. The director's going to say, Clive, shut it down. And when he does, we'll shut it down. But until then, and this is a very important one, because this is really what we're facing, and it's existential. So nuclear disarmament, right? And the Brics position. So the Pact includes a recommitment to nuclear disarmament. Given that Brics includes nuclear powers like Russia and China, what role do you see Brics playing in global nuclear disarmament negotiations, especially in contrast to Western-led initiatives?
It's very important. Nuclear disarmament is a fairy tale that has been told for how many decades? And
Many.
sorry to be so rude, okay, but it's a fairy tale. It's told exclusively to inattentive citizens. There has never been any nuclear disarmament. If you mean to put some of the missiles that were in the bases in some storage, okay, then know that you have been fooled. Nuclear war technologies have only been growing, never regressing. Today, there are more countries with nuclear weapons when the United Nations Security Council was established as a balancing instrument for nuclear deterrence. So we need to open our eyes and stop being those who pretend we don't know. Here again, whether we like it or not, we have to deal with the aggressors and the aggrieved. The nuclear weapon problem is a problem born in the United States and put into practice by the United States, only by them until today. So the overstates that came after that technology did so to choose the need to balance the hegemony that was already very strong. Once in a while, we should ask ourselves how history would have gone if in August 1945 someone had not detonated more than 200,000 people in a matter of seconds. Maybe nuclear power would still have been developed, but not as a weapon of mass destruction to kept in the drawer, threatening the neighbor for merely claiming to have it. So with the current world formatting, if BRICS Plus countries deprive themselves of nuclear weapons, which are not just the missiles warheads, okay, please consider these, a world war, in my opinion, with only one winner would be unleashed in a matter of hours. And unfortunately, since 1940s, we have inherited an unholy balance. That's it. I really hope, really hope. I teach to my students of geopolitics. There is one initial purpose that I share always with them. We are studying geopolitics to realize a better world out of the world, to stop to use geopolitics only as a word tool. Because geopolitics, we should start to think about geopolitics as a peace tool, not a word tool. And that's very important. Okay, and that's a point of view that, sorry to say, but with my colleagues in my subject, I still didn't listen from anybody. And that's terrible. Okay. this thing of nuclear deterrence is something that we still have, and I think we will be able to have a true disarmament of nuclear weapons only when we will be established a Pax Multipolaris. So that means generations to educate the people to think differently, not that you have to fight always with your neighbors, but that you can integrate, you can dialogue, you can, build together a true cooperation. That's one of my life and professional life as academic, one of my very most important purposes personally.
That's, yeah. I love it. It's one thing I do like doing I like doing this show, speaking to people like you and getting to hear firsthand this sort of information. And I hope our audience appreciates it. The last prepared question I have, is about finance, right? The money talks. Okay. So the last one. BRICS countries have expressed a desire to reform the global financial architecture to better represent developing countries. And this is very prominent with Kazan, right? People are really looking at this going, what's going to happen? The payment system, possible common currency, we don't know. How do BRICS nations plan to leverage this opportunity to reshape institutions like the IMF and World Bank to better align with their interests?
Very important, long and complex question. I will briefly answer. Okay, and sorry in advance if I'm not an economist, so I immediately ask for forgiveness for any inaccurate information or technical errors. Okay, so do BRICS intend to reform institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank? Probably so. But again, either by trial and error or by creating alternative institutions. So the media battle on this issue is so important, okay? Because BRICS was born as a geoeconomic partnership, not a political partnership. So it's about business. And within the past 3 years, there has been repeated talk about this of a made in BRICS currency many times. And I think that most of them were just to see the reactions of the international trade and of the position of dollar, okay? So they really did it as an info warfare weapon, really well done. This currency is proposed as an alternative to what's already known, embedded in the strong de-dollarization process. And this process is one of the main tasks of BRICS, okay? Declared. So the BRICS currency, for what we know, for the rumors, would be backed 40% by gold and 60% by local currencies, would be apolitical, and would be outside of circumference of the SWIFT payment method. That's very important because, as we know, many states that are BRICS are under sanctions and will be excluded by SWIFT already, okay? And SWIFT is this kind of chamber of compensation between the transactions made in USA, and actually half and half with UK, and it's the treasure of the international trade, because who govern the SWIFT govern the trade. So this BRICS currency, most likely digital since its conception, we know that would be the main driving force behind the de-dollarization strategy and could be on the table in Kazan summit. Really, it could erode a significant part of the dominant position of the United States dollar, okay, as many overdeveloping countries show their willingness to join the alliance. So let's look at how much gold continues to rise steadily. We saw this 40% of increasing, considering 1 year. Gold is raising his value every day. The regional currencies that could be affected are definitely the Chinese yuan, the ruble from Russia, and the rupee from India. This relationship aligns with the alleged outcome of a recent meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the head of the Shanghai-based new Brics Development Bank, okay? Because they created this development bank, the NDB, okay? The currency would be coupled with a platform of multilateral settlements and digital payments that would link the financial markets of BRICS members, called the BRICS Bridge. This BRICS Bridge is something similar to already the TM bridge that we have. It's kind of maybe a prototype for a different SWIFT, okay? And again, a blockchain-based payment that system, okay? Totally excluded from the US dollar, that would be called BRICS Pay. So, had the settlement repository, an insurance system, and the BRICS personal rating agency, and there is no more need to, for what Western stuff. They will exclude them totally, and West will have to run back to the new BRICS system. The time has come, maybe, for BRICS to become a real player in this sense, and the world demands it. The leaders of the BRICS countries clearly understand this, in my opinion, especially Chinese, and they have the moral power and political will to create an organization that provides a secure reference point. For a BRICS agreement among the countries to mean anything, the countries must agree on a framework for action. And that means accepting some responsibilities in exchange for some rights. And there seems to be no better, way to achieve this than to arrive at mutually agreed obligations on the settlement of financial transactions. This is a change that does not happen in a few months, in my humble opinion, maybe a couple of years, because we have to think about it. Transform entire markets, moving political and extra-political wheels is something huge. There are power groups that are not going to make their business more ethical just because we want to talk about multipolarity. So every transition phase requires time, precise movements, and experiments. We are pioneers in this, okay? They are pioneers in this. And if indeed financial resolution will be adopted in Kazan, in the best possibilities, I have the impression that they will not actually be functional for at least at a year. Because usually when a new country enters in BRICS, there is 1 year to set everything and then start to work seriously inside of BRICS. So systems has to be assessed better. We cannot yet know. We will see. I am hopeful that great proposal will come out of the BRICS Plus Summit in Kazan 2024 for that future what you quoted already, Pax Multipolarities, that in my opinion is considered now maybe the greatest good of all for everybody in the world.
Yeah. Lorenzo, I really appreciate you coming and talking to the audience, answering these questions, going a little bit longer than we thought we would. But it's very important. All the things you've covered are really important. I really appreciate it. So maybe we'll see you again if you'd like to.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Propose something comes up that you really want to tell the audience, let us know. And, that's what we're here for. Also, we want to be a voice for the experts who have something new to say, who it's important, right? Usually as a channel, we are proposing what based on events, but we're not experts. So it would be great if you say to us, oh, look, think BRICS, we should talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. You are doing a great job, let me say, really, a great job. Be aware and be proud of that, always.
I will, yes. Awesome. All right. Okay, well, let's end off. Thank you very much, Lorenzo.
Thank you so much to all of you.
Okay, if you've enjoyed this episode and wish to join the conversation, you can comment below. Please like and share this episode to spread it as far as possible. We're putting together a plan to bring you right into the middle of the Kazan Summit. We want you to be more than just spectators. We want you to be part of the action. We're funding this ourselves, so if you want to support our efforts, you can do so with a super thanks through donations on our Buy Me a Coffee page or just by spreading this video around your network. Any contributions you can make is appreciated. Thanks for tuning in to Brics Briefs. Don't forget that you can follow us on our Substack and other social media platforms, especially our Telegram channel for daily news on Brics, all linked below. Stay curious, stay connected, stay optimistic, and let's keep exploring together. Ciao.